They called her nothing more than a weak omega. Too poor to matter. Too powerless to protect anyone. But every full moon, the Alpha King's royal wolves disappeared into the frozen wilderness. No one knew where they went. Not even the king himself. Then one cold winter night, the impossible happened. A giant white royal wolf appeared at the lonely Omega's doorstep, carrying a tiny orphaned pup in its jaws. She thought it was only one lost child. She was wrong. The next night, the wolves returned with another, then another, then another. Within weeks, every orphaned wolf pup in the entire territory was sleeping beneath her roof. She never asked where they came from. She never asked whose blood ran through their veins. She simply opened her door and her heart. But kindness has a price. Soon the nobles accused her of stealing royal heirs. The High Luna demanded her execution. The royal council called her a traitor. And when soldiers marched toward her little cabin with chains in their hands, one frightened child whispered the words that changed everything. "Please, don't let them take us away." That was the moment. The weakest Omega stood where no one else dared. And when the Alpha King finally learned why his own royal wolves had chosen her, the entire kingdom would discover a truth so heartbreaking. It would change the future of every pack forever. The wind screamed across the frozen northern territory like a wounded beast searching for its next victim. Snow crashed against towering pine trees, burying old trails beneath thick white blankets. The moon struggled to shine through the storm, its pale light disappearing behind dark clouds that stretched endlessly across the sky. On nights like this, even the strongest warriors stayed inside. Even wolves avoided the forest. Because everyone believed the mountain belonged to death after sunset. Yet at the edge of that endless wilderness stood a tiny wooden cabin. Its roof sagged beneath heavy snow. Its walls were old and cracked. Warm light barely escaped through a single frosted window. A young Omega knelt beside a weak fire, feeding it the last pieces of dry wood she owned. Her name was Elara. She had no servants, no family, no pack, only silence. The tiny cabin was simple. One wooden table, 2 old chairs, shelves filled with dried herbs hanging from ropes across the ceiling. Small glass bottles stood beside bundles of lavender, mint, mountain flowers, and healing roots gathered from the dangerous forest. Every coin she earned came from healing strangers. Most never thanked her. Some refused to pay. Others called her cursed simply because she was an Omega living alone. Every morning she climbed frozen cliffs searching for medicine. Every evening she returned with frozen hands and tired feet. And every night, she prayed that tomorrow someone else might need saving. Elara carefully stirred a pot of herbal tea. The gentle smell filled the room. She smiled to herself. I hope old Mrs. Rowan feels better tomorrow. There was nobody there to hear her. She still smiled anyway. Kindness had become a habit. Loneliness had become her companion. She placed 3 tiny pieces of bread onto a wooden plate. That was all she had left. 1 piece for tonight. 1 for tomorrow. 1. If someone hungry knocked on her door. She laughed softly. I really should stop giving my food away. But even as she said the words, she already knew she never would. The storm grew stronger. The windows rattled. Snow slammed against the cabin walls. A long mournful howl echoed across the mountain. Elara froze. Her smile disappeared. That wasn't an ordinary wolf. It was much deeper, much older, powerful enough to make the entire forest fall silent. Another howl answered. Then another. Then another. The sound surrounded her cabin from every direction. She slowly stood. Her heartbeat quickened. No, she whispered. Not tonight. Everyone knew those voices. Royal wolves. The Alpha King's personal guardians. Massive white beasts that obeyed only one command. Kill. Protect. Stories claimed they could smell lies. They never entered villages. They never approached ordinary people. And they certainly never visited forgotten Omegas. Elara carefully reached for the old iron poker beside the fireplace. She knew it would never stop a royal wolf. But holding something made her feel less helpless. The howling stopped. Silence filled the mountain. That silence frightened her more than the storm. A slow knock echoed against the wooden door. Elara stared in disbelief. Nobody knocked during snowstorms, especially not this far from civilization. Her feet refused to move. Another knock, gentler this time. She swallowed hard. Lily. She stepped toward the door. Every board beneath her feet creaked loudly. Her hand trembled as she reached for the wooden handle. She whispered one final prayer, then opened the door. Freezing wind exploded inside the cabin. Snow rushed across the floor. Standing beneath the moonlight was the largest wolf Elara had ever seen. His white fur shimmered like fresh snow. Golden eyes glowed with impossible intelligence. Scars covered his massive shoulders. He looked less like an animal, and more like a living legend. Behind him stood 6 more royal wolves, silent, perfectly still, watching. Elara forgot how to breathe. Every story she had ever heard flooded her mind. One bite, one command, one mistake. That was all it would take. The great wolf slowly walked forward. Not with anger, not with hunger, with purpose. He lowered his head. Between his powerful jaws rested a tiny gray wolf pup wrapped in torn cloth. The little body barely moved. Tiny breaths escaped his nose. His fur was stained with blood. The great wolf gently placed the pup onto Elara's doorstep. Then he stepped back. He simply looked at her, waiting. Elara stared in confusion. "What?" she whispered. "What do you want me to do?" The great wolf glanced down at the pup, then back into her eyes. No growl, no threat, only trust. Something inside Elara broke. She dropped the iron poker. Immediately she knelt beside the tiny pup. "Oh!" Her voice cracked. "You're freezing." She carefully lifted the child into her arms. He was frighteningly light. His little body shook violently. His ears were torn. Fresh claw marks covered his tiny back. Someone had left him to die. Tears filled Elara's eyes. "It's all right," she whispered. "You're safe now." She looked up to thank the wolves. But none of them had moved. They continued watching silently, as if waiting for permission to leave. Elara nodded gently. "I'll take care of him." The moment those words left her lips, the great white wolf lowered his head once, then turned toward the forest. The others followed. Within seconds, they disappeared into the storm, leaving only endless snowfall behind. Elara hurried inside. She placed the pup beside the fireplace. His skin felt like ice. She wrapped him in every blanket she owned. She heated goat's milk over the fire, mixed healing herbs into warm water, carefully cleaned every wound. The tiny pup cried weakly. "No," Elara whispered. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." She gently held his tiny hand. "I'm here." Hours passed. The storm continued outside. Elara never rested. She stayed beside him all night, changing cloths, checking his fever, whispering gentle stories until sunrise. Just before dawn, the tiny pup slowly opened his eyes, bright silver, filled with fear. He looked around desperately, then looked at Elara. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, his trembling voice barely escaped his lips. He swallowed painfully. "Are you sending me away too?" Elara's heart shattered. She slowly brushed the hair away from his forehead. "No." She smiled through tears. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever." The little pup burst into tears. He wrapped both tiny arms around her neck with surprising strength. Elara hugged him tightly. She did not know his name. She did not know where he came from. She did not know why the Alpha King's wolves had chosen her. None of that mattered. Because in that single moment, a lonely omega without a family, had become someone's home, far beyond the cabin. Hidden among the snow-covered trees, a tall man wearing a black cloak watched the tiny cabin from the shadows. Snow gathered across his broad shoulders. His sharp golden eyes never left the window. He watched Elara gently rocking the orphaned pup to sleep beside the fire. The man's expression remained calm, unreadable, but something flickered deep inside those cold eyes. Respect, curiosity. Oh, King Kalin, the Alpha King himself, turned toward the 7 royal wolves waiting silently behind him. You chose her. None of the wolves moved. The king's gaze returned to the glowing cabin one last time. For the first time, he murmured quietly, I believe you may have chosen better than I ever could. He disappeared into the storm, never realizing that before another moon had passed, his royal wolves would return to the lonely Omega's cabin once again. And they would not come alone. The first light of dawn slowly spilled across the frozen mountains. Golden rays touched the endless blanket of snow, making the entire valley sparkle like a kingdom carved from crystal. Inside the little wooden cabin, warmth slowly returned. The tiny pup who had arrived on death's doorstep slept peacefully beside the fire, wrapped in every blanket Elara owned. His breathing was steady now. The fever had finally broken. Elara sat quietly beside him, her back resting against the wall. She had not slept even for a moment. Dark circles rested beneath her gentle eyes. Her hands were covered with tiny cuts from gathering herbs. Yet when she looked at the sleeping child, she smiled, softly, peacefully, almost like she had forgotten how lonely her life had been only yesterday. The little pup suddenly opened his silver eyes. For a moment, fear flashed across his face. He quickly looked around the room. Then his frightened eyes landed on Elara. She smiled. Good morning. He remained silent. His tiny fingers clutched the blanket tightly. Elara carefully poured warm milk into a wooden cup. You don't have to be afraid. I won't hurt you. The child hesitated before asking quietly. Are you really letting me stay? Elara nodded. As long as you need. The pup lowered his head. Nobody had ever answered him like that before. Tears slowly filled his eyes again. My father said. His voice trembled. That weak wolves only slow everyone down. Elara's heart ached. She gently placed the warm cup into his tiny hands. He was wrong. The child looked at her with surprise. You are alive. You are kind. And you're stronger than you think. The little pup tried to smile. It was the first real smile he had given anyone in a very long time. The storm had finally passed. Elara stepped into the snow carrying an empty basket. The cold wind kissed her cheeks as she searched beneath frozen bushes for winter berries and healing roots. She whispered to herself while walking. One child eats much more than I expected. She laughed softly. I suppose we'll both have to work harder. Hours passed. She returned carrying only a handful of herbs. Winter had nearly emptied the forest. Food was becoming harder to find. She quietly divided everything she had. Half for the little pup, half for herself. When dinner came, she secretly pushed most of her own bowl toward him. The pup noticed. What about you? I'm not very hungry. She lied with another smile. He looked down. Even at his young age, he knew she was pretending. Without saying a word, he broke his piece of bread into 2, then pushed half back toward her. We can both be full. Elara stared at him. For just a second, her eyes became wet. She accepted the bread. Not because she needed it, because refusing would break his heart. At evening, the little cabin felt different. Not bigger, not richer, simply less lonely. The pup slowly wandered around the room. He pointed toward the dried flowers hanging above. What are these? Lavender. And those? Mountain mint. What do? They help people heal. The little boy thought carefully before asking, "Can they heal broken hearts?" Elara froze, then smiled sadly. "I wish they could." The child quietly walked over. Without saying anything, he hugged her. Tiny hug. Small arms around her waist. Elara closed her eyes. Broken hearts healed differently. They healed one small act of love at a time. Far away, at the royal palace, King Kaelan stood before the enormous window overlooking the White Mountains. His black cloak moved gently in the cold wind entering through the balcony. Below him, hundreds of wolves trained inside the royal courtyard. Power, discipline, strength, everything his kingdom respected. Yet his thoughts refused to leave the tiny cabin hidden beyond the forest. One of his commanders approached carefully. "My king." Kaelan never turned. "What is it?" "The scouting wolves have returned. And they refused today's patrol." That finally caught his attention. Royal wolves never ignored commands. Never. Kaelan walked into the courtyard. 7 enormous white wolves stood together, silent, watching him. "I ordered you to guard the northern border." None of them moved. "Does it?" The lead wolf slowly turned his head toward the distant forest, toward Elara's cabin. Kaelan narrowed his eyes. "What is there?" "That matters more than your king." The wolves simply stared, almost as though they already knew an answer he had yet to discover. Night fell once again. Snowflakes drifted gently through the silent forest. Inside the cabin, Elara tucked the little pup into bed. "What was your name?" The child hesitated, then whispered, "Finn." She smiled. "Good night, Finn." "Good night." He stopped. His eyes searched hers. "May I call you mother?" Silence filled the room. Elara's breath caught. Nobody had ever called her that. She gently brushed his hair away. "If that's what makes you feel safe." Finn smiled. His eyes slowly closed. Within seconds, he was asleep. Elara quietly wiped away a tear. A familiar howl echoed through the mountains. Her heart skipped. "No," she whispered. "They're back." She slowly opened the door. Standing beneath the moon were the 7 royal wolves once again. But this time, they were not alone. Behind them stood another wolf, smaller. His white fur was stained with mud. Across his back lay a tiny wolf pup wrapped inside an old torn cloak. The child wasn't moving. The lead wolf carefully stepped forward. Once again, he gently placed the little body before Elara. She dropped to her knees. Another orphan. Another child left behind. Another innocent life nobody wanted. Without hesitation, she picked the little girl into her arms. "Come inside." The wolves watched, silent, patient, almost relieved, as Elara carried the second child into the warmth. The lead wolf looked toward the stars, then released a deep, powerful howl. The sound rolled across mountains, through forests, across frozen rivers. Far beyond the horizon, other royal wolves lifted their heads. They answered, one after another. A message passed across the entire territory. The king heard it from his palace balcony. His expression slowly changed. His wolves were calling one another. Not for war. Not for hunting. Not for danger. For something else. Something they had never done before. Deep within the wilderness, an old she-wolf gently lifted another abandoned pup from beneath a fallen tree. Miles away, a scarred royal wolf rescued twins hiding inside an empty cave. Another crossed an icy river carrying an injured child upon his back. One by one, the king's wolves began searching every corner of the territory. Not for enemies, not for prey, but for forgotten children. And every trail, every snowy path, every set of giant paw prints, led toward one lonely cabin, toward one forgotten Omega, toward the only person who had never asked a single orphan whether they were worth saving. The first rays of morning painted the frozen valley in shades of gold. Smoke curled gently from the chimney of the tiny wooden cabin. Life had changed forever. Only 2 days earlier, the cabin had been silent. No. Tiny footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. Soft laughter replaced loneliness. Little Finn carefully carried a bucket of water that was almost too heavy for him. The young girl rescued the night before sat near the fireplace wrapped in one of Elara's old blankets. She still had not spoken a single word. Fear lived inside her eyes. Every sudden sound made her flinch. Elara knelt beside her with a bowl of warm soup. "You don't have to talk." She smiled gently. "You can stay quiet as long as you need." The little girl slowly accepted the bowl with trembling hands. For the first time, she took a small bite. Finn smiled happily. "See? I told you. She makes the best soup in the whole world." Elara laughed softly. "I'm afraid this is the only soup I've ever made." Finn grinned. "Then it's still the best." The little girl's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. The peaceful morning was interrupted by distant voices. Villagers climbed the snowy hill carrying baskets and tools. They stopped several steps away from the cabin. No one dared come closer. One elderly woman whispered, "That's the place. The king's wolves came here." Another man crossed his arms. "I don't believe it. Royal wolves don't visit omegas." A younger hunter pointed toward enormous paw prints frozen in the snow. "Then explain those." The crowd fell silent. The footprints were larger than dinner plates. No ordinary wolf could leave marks like that. Elara stepped outside carrying fresh herbs. Everyone stared at her. Some with curiosity, some with fear, some with suspicion. Old Mrs. Rowan finally walked forward. "You healed my fever. I owe you my life." She lowered her voice. "People are talking. They say the Alpha King's wolves keep coming here." Elara nodded honestly. "They do." Gasps spread through the crowd. A young man stepped backward. "Why?" "I don't know. What are they bringing?" Elara looked toward the cabin window where Finn and the little girl were watching. "Children." Silence. Nobody expected that answer. One woman frowned. "Whose children?" "I don't know." Another villager whispered. "Why would the king's wolves trust you?" Elara looked down. "I've been asking myself the same question." Before anyone could speak again, a deep howl echoed across the valley. Every face turned toward the forest. The villagers immediately stepped back in fear. Large shadows moved between the snow-covered trees. 1, 3, then 5. The royal wolves appeared once more. Their white coats shined beneath the morning sun. They walked with calm confidence. Not toward the villagers. Toward Elara. The crowd scattered. Some dropped their baskets. Others ran down the hill without looking back. Only Elara remained standing. She smiled gently. "You've come back." The lead wolf lowered his massive head. Behind him, another wolf carried a tiny bundle wrapped inside worn fur. Baby. No older than a few months. The infant wasn't crying. She was simply too weak. Elara's face filled with worry. "Oh no!" She rushed forward. The wolf carefully placed the baby into her arms. The tiny girl opened sleepy blue eyes. Her lips trembled. She reached toward Elara's face with tiny fingers. Without thinking, Elara kissed the baby's forehead. "I've got you. You don't have to be afraid." The lead wolf quietly watched. For the first time. He gently touched his forehead against Elara's shoulder. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. A royal wolf had shown affection to a human. The villagers watched from below the hill. None of them could believe what they had seen. One frightened hunter whispered, "The wolves trust her. More than they trust anyone." Far away, inside the royal palace, King Kalan listened as another messenger knelt before him. "My king, the rumors are spreading faster than we can stop them." Kalan remained silent. "The villages say your royal wolves have chosen an omega." Another messenger stepped forward. Several packs believe she is using forbidden moon magic. A third added quietly. And many nobles are demanding her arrest. The king's expression never changed. Does it? He asked only one question. Have my wolves harmed anyone? No, your majesty. Have they stolen anything? No. Then why is everyone afraid? None of the advisors answered. Kaelan slowly walked toward the palace window. He remembered the warmth inside that tiny cabin. The hungry woman who fed strangers before herself. The frightened child who slept peacefully for the first time. Something didn't fit. He had ruled for years. He could recognize lies. And nothing about Elara felt false. Miles away. Hidden inside a luxurious mansion. High Luna Seraphine stood before a blazing fireplace. A nervous spy bowed deeply. My lady. The wolves delivered another child today. Seraphine's beautiful face hardened. How many now? 4. The spy hesitated. Perhaps more before nightfall. Seraphine slowly closed her eyes. This cannot continue. She turned toward the window. If those children begin speaking, everything we've buried will rise again. Another noblewoman looked confused. What do you mean? Seraphine answered coldly. There are children in that cabin, whose names should never be remembered. She slowly smiled. A poor Omega cannot be allowed to protect the secrets of noble blood. Snow continued falling. Inside the little cabin, Finn laughed as he helped the silent little girl feed the baby warm milk. For the first time, the frightened girl whispered a single word. Thank. Elara looked at her with surprise. The child quickly looked away. But Finn clapped happily. You talked. The little girl blushed. A tiny smile appeared. Elara felt hope bloom inside her heart. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know why destiny kept sending children to her door. She only knew one thing. As long as they arrived frightened, they would leave feeling loved. But beyond the forest, dozens of glowing golden eyes were already moving through the snow. The Alpha King's wolves had found even more abandoned pups. And before another sunrise, Elara's tiny cabin would no longer be big enough for the family destiny had chosen for her. By sunset, the little cabin no longer sounded empty. Tiny voices filled every corner. Some children laughed while chasing one another around the fireplace. Others carefully folded blankets that Elara had stitched from old clothes. Little Finn proudly carried firewood almost as tall as himself. I can do it. I've gotten stronger. Elara smiled. I know you have. The silent little girl, whom Elara had named Lily until she remembered her real name, quietly rocked the baby to sleep. For the first time, peace lived inside those walls. Never lasts long in kingdoms ruled by fear. Far across the northern territory, another royal wolf crossed an icy river. A frightened little boy clung tightly to his thick white fur. The child's lips were blue from the cold. Behind them, a burning village disappeared beneath falling snow. No one followed. No one came looking. The little boy had been left behind. Like so many others, the great wolf never slowed. His destination was already decided. The lonely Omega. King Kaelan stood inside the royal war hall. Maps covered the enormous stone table. His generals discussed borders, trade routes, enemy packs. None of it held the king's attention. His eyes rested on the northern forests. One elderly advisor finally spoke. My king, you haven't listened to a single report. Kaelan answered quietly. Because something more important is happening. The room fell silent. Commander Darius stepped forward. Is this about the Omega? Kaelan finally looked at him. What do you know about her? Darius hesitated. Only rumors. They say your wolves have abandoned their royal duties. They say they now serve her. Another noble laughed. A starving Omega controlling royal wolves. It sounds ridiculous. Kaelan's expression turned cold. My wolves are never ridiculous. The laughter stopped immediately. If they chose her, he continued. They had a reason. At the edge of the room, a woman silently listened. High Luna Seraphine. Beautiful. Elegant. Dangerous. She lowered her eyes to hide her growing anger. Every word the king spoke made one thing painfully clear. He wasn't dismissing the Omega anymore. He was beginning to trust her. That could never be allowed. Hours later, night covered the mountains once again. Inside the cabin, Elara quietly counted what little food remained. 3 pieces of bread, handful of dried berries, some herbs, nothing more. She sighed softly. There won't be enough tomorrow. Finn overheard her. We'll help. We can gather wood. Lily nodded. I can carry water. The tiny baby giggled without understanding. Elara smiled despite the worry in her heart. No. You are children. You deserve to play. Finn shook his head. We're family. Families help each other. Those simple words almost made Elara cry. Family. She had dreamed of hearing that word her entire life. Before she could answer, a loud howl echoed outside. Then another. Then another. She slowly opened the door. Her breath caught. There were not 7 wolves anymore. There were 12. Massive white guardians stood beneath the moon. Some carried children. Others carried bundles filled with blankets. One dragged a small sled loaded with dried meat. Another carried fresh fish. The wolves had begun hunting. Not for themselves. For the children. One after another. They gently placed frightened pups onto the snow. Some could barely walk. One little girl held a broken doll. A tiny boy refused to let go of a torn blanket. Twins clung to each other, too terrified to separate. Elara's eyes filled with tears. So many. The lead wolf lowered his head, almost apologizing, as if saying, there are still more. Without hesitation, Elara smiled warmly. Come inside. Every child. Every single one. No questions. No hesitation. The cabin became crowded within minutes. Children sat beside the fire. Older ones helped the younger. Finn proudly showed newcomers where blankets were kept. Lily gently comforted crying toddlers. The frightened babies slowly stopped crying. For the first time, they felt safe. Hidden among the distant trees, King Kaelin watched everything. His black cloak disappeared into the darkness. He had followed his wolves once again. He expected chaos. He found something impossible. Home. Not built with wealth. Not protected by soldiers. But held together by kindness. He watched Elara kneel before every new child. What is your name? If they answered, she smiled. If they stayed silent, she simply hugged them. She never forced a single word. Kaelin quietly whispered, how can someone who has so little give so much? Nearby, Commander Darius finally spoke. My king. She's hungry. Kaelin looked toward the cabin window. Elara quietly pretended to eat while secretly giving her own meal to the youngest children. She thought nobody noticed, but Kaelin did. His jaw tightened. For years, kings had offered him expensive feasts. Powerful nobles competed for his attention. Yet none of them had ever sacrificed a single meal for someone else. The Omega everyone called weak was stronger than warriors who carried swords. Suddenly, a frightened cry echoed from inside the cabin. One of the newest boys had awakened from a nightmare. No, don't leave me. My mother. The child shook uncontrollably. Without hesitation, Elara rushed to him. She wrapped him inside a blanket. I'm here. You're safe. The little boy sobbed against her shoulder. They said I wasn't worth saving. Elara gently lifted his chin. They lied. You are worth everything. Even Kaelin closed his eyes. Those words reached deeper than she could ever imagine. As once, long before he became king, someone had spoken almost the same words to him. Forgotten memory surfaced. A young prince. Alone. afraid, until his own mother whispered, "You are enough." He had buried that memory years ago. One Omega had brought it back. But not everyone watching the cabin felt hope. Far below the mountain, Seraphine's spies hid among the trees. One quietly counted every child entering the house. "There are too many now." Another nodded. "If this continues, people will begin asking where these children came from." The oldest spy looked toward the glowing cabin. "We should end this tonight." He reached for a torch. Another stopped him. "No. The lady has different orders." "What orders?" The spy smiled darkly. "Let the Omega collect every orphan. When they're all together, it will be much easier to destroy them all." The cold wind carried those terrible words into the darkness. Above them, a white royal wolf slowly lifted his head. Golden eyes narrowed. He had heard everything. Without making a sound, the great beast disappeared into the forest, running toward only one man, the Alpha King. Because before dawn, Kaelin would learn that someone wasn't planning to steal the children. Someone was planning to burn their only home to the ground. The news reached King Kaelin before the first light of dawn. The great white royal wolf raced through the snow without stopping until he reached the palace gates. Royal guards immediately stepped aside. The exhausted wolf lowered his head before the Alpha King. His breathing was heavy. His golden eyes burned with urgency. Kaelin knelt beside his oldest companion. "What happened?" The wolf let out a low growl. Then he turned toward the northern mountains. Toward Elara's cabin. Commander Darius frowned. "My king. Something is wrong." Kaelin slowly stood. "Prepare my horse." Darius blinked. "You are going yourself." Kaelin fastened his black cloak around his shoulders. "No." He looked toward the waiting wolves. "We are going." Within moments, the palace gates opened. 7 royal wolves disappeared into the snowy wilderness. The Alpha King followed close behind. For the first time in many years, the ruler of the kingdom abandoned his royal schedule. There was only one place he needed to be. The lonely cabin on the mountain. Morning arrived quietly. Inside the cabin, chaos had become normal. Children filled every corner. Tiny blankets covered the floor. Warm soup simmered over the fire. Laughter mixed with sleepy yawns. Elara hadn't rested for nearly 3 days. Yet she continued smiling. She carefully tied Lily's hair into 2 small braids. "There. You look beautiful." Lily touched her hair and smiled shyly. "No one ever braided my hair before." Elara gently kissed the top of her head. "Then we'll do it every morning." Nearby, Finn proudly taught the younger pups how to stack firewood. "No. Like this. If it falls, we'll all be cold." The younger children giggled. One tiny boy accidentally dropped every log. The pile crashed across the floor. Silence filled the room. The little boy immediately lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I always ruin everything." Before anyone could answer, Finn walked over. He picked up one piece of wood. Then another. He smiled. "We'll do it together." Within seconds, every child joined him. No one blamed the frightened boy. No one laughed. By the time the pile was finished, the little boy couldn't stop smiling. Elara quietly watched from across the room. Hope warmed her heart. Children who had arrived broken were slowly learning how to trust again. The peaceful moment ended. 3 expensive horse-drawn carriages climbed the snowy road. Behind them marched nearly 30 armored soldiers. Village elders followed from a safe distance. Whispers spread through the crowd. "They've finally come. They're taking the children. The Omega is finished." The heavy wooden door shook beneath a loud knock. Bang, bang, bang. Every child froze. Several immediately ran toward Elara. The babies started crying. Finn grabbed Lily's hand. "It's all right," Elara whispered. "I'll answer." She slowly opened the door. Standing outside was Captain Roland of the Royal Guard. His silver armor gleamed beneath the winter sun. Behind him stood rows of soldiers. Their hands rested on sword hilts. Roland looked around the crowded cabin. His eyes widened. So the rumors are true. He unfolded an official scroll. By order of the Royal Council, every child inside this cabin is to be surrendered immediately. Gasps echoed behind Elara. Several children began crying. Finn stepped closer. He grabbed the back of Elara's dress with trembling fingers. Roland continued reading. The Omega known as Elara is accused of unlawful custody of unidentified royal blood. You are ordered to cooperate. Elara took a slow breath. She looked behind her. Tiny frightened faces stared back. Some had only arrived yesterday. Some still carried scars. One little girl quietly whispered, "They found us." Another child started shaking uncontrollably. "They'll send us back." Elara's heart broke. She turned back toward Roland. "Where will they go?" Roland hesitated. "That is not my concern." "Then whose concern is it?" "Silence," she asked again. "Which home? Which family? Who has come to claim them?" No answer. Only silence. 'Cause no one had. Roland lowered the scroll. "My orders are clear." Elara slowly shook her head. "No." The soldiers exchanged surprised looks. Roland frowned. "Did you just refuse a royal order?" "I asked a simple question." She answered calmly. "If these children have families, let their families come. If someone truly loves them, I'll open this door myself." She looked at every frightened child behind her. "But I will not hand them to strangers." One soldier stepped forward angrily. "You dare challenge the council?" Elara stood taller. "I am protecting children. If that is a crime, then yes, I dare." The village fell completely silent. No Omega had ever spoken to royal soldiers like that. One elderly woman quietly wiped away tears. A young hunter whispered, "She's standing alone." Another answered, "No. Look behind her." Every child had gathered together, not hiding, standing beside Elara. Finn squeezed her hand. "We're not leaving." Lily nodded. "You promised." "I did," Elara whispered. "And I keep my promises." Captain Roland sighed heavily. "I don't wish to hurt anyone." "Then don't," Elara replied softly. A tense silence followed. "Finley." Roland raised one hand. "Search the cabin." The soldiers moved forward. Immediately, the children cried out. One frightened toddler stumbled and fell. A soldier reached toward him. Before he could touch the child, Elara stepped between them. "You will not touch him." Her voice remained calm, but every word echoed across the snowy valley. The soldier frowned. "Move aside." "No. He belongs under my protection." The man reached again. Elara refused to move. "If you wish to take him, you will have to move me first." The crowd gasped. Even Roland stared in disbelief. An unarmed Omega, standing before armed warriors, protecting children who weren't even her own. The youngest pup wrapped both arms around Elara's leg. His tiny voice trembled. "Please. I don't want to be alone again." Elara gently rested one hand on his head. "You won't be. I promise." That exact moment, a deep thunderous howl rolled across the mountains. Every soldier turned. The horses became restless. Birds exploded into the sky. From the forest, 7 enormous white wolves emerged, walking slowly, silently. Golden eyes locked onto the soldiers. Behind them, another figure appeared. A tall man wearing a long black cloak. His presence alone silenced the valley. Commander Roland's face instantly turned pale. Every soldier dropped to one knee. The villagers bowed. No one dared breathe. King Kalen had arrived. But instead of looking at the soldiers, his first gaze found only one person, the exhausted Omega, standing between armed warriors and a group of frightened orphan children. For the first time, the Alpha King truly understood why his royal wolves had chosen her. And in that single silent moment, everything inside him began to change. King Kaelin stopped only a few steps from Elara. The cold mountain wind pulled at his long black cloak. Snowflakes drifted silently between them. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Elara had heard countless stories about the Alpha King, the ruler whose judgment never failed, the warrior who defeated entire packs without mercy, the king who never smiled. Yet the man standing before her looked less interested in the frightened soldiers, and more concerned about the crying children hiding behind her. His sharp golden eyes slowly moved across the room. Finn, Lily, the sleeping baby, the frightened twins, the little boy still holding Elara's dress with shaking hands. Finley. His gaze returned to Elara. You protected them. His deep voice was calm, simple, but every person standing outside heard it clearly. Elara lowered her head respectfully. They needed someone. Kaelin looked around once more. And no one else came. She quietly answered, no. A heavy silence settled over the valley. Captain Rowan stepped forward. My king. The royal council ordered these children to be taken into custody. Kaelin never looked at him. I know. The council believes some of them may belong to noble bloodlines. Oh. The Alpha King remained silent. Roland continued carefully. They ordered the Omega to surrender every child. Kaelin slowly asked, did anyone come, claiming to be their family? Roland hesitated. No. Did anyone ask if the children were alive? No, Your Majesty. Did anyone bring food? No. Medicine? No. Blankets? No. Only then did Kaelin finally turn toward his soldiers. His golden eyes became cold. So everyone remembered their titles. After forgetting their children, not one soldier dared answer. Behind Elara, Finn slowly whispered, is he angry with us? Elara gently squeezed his tiny hand. I don't know. But stay behind me. Kaelin heard those words. Something tightened inside his chest. Even now, she thought she needed to protect the children from him. She didn't know. He had no intention of hurting them. One tiny toddler suddenly wandered forward. The little boy could barely walk. He stopped in front of the Alpha King. Everyone held their breath. The child looked up with innocent eyes. Are you the Wolf King? Several guards reached for their swords. Kaelin quietly lifted one hand. They immediately stopped. The king slowly knelt until he was eye level with the child. Yes. The boy looked at him carefully. Then asked the question no adult had dared speak. If you're the king, why didn't anyone save us? Silence. The wind itself seemed to disappear. Even the wolves lowered their heads. Kaelin stared into the little boy's eyes. For the first time in years, the Alpha King had no answer. The child wasn't accusing him. He was simply asking. Children always do. With honesty. Kaelin slowly looked toward the crowded cabin. Every frightened face waiting for someone to speak. Finley. He answered quietly. I failed. The soldiers looked up in shock. No king admitted failure. Ever. Yet Kaelin continued. I did not know. But I should have. The little boy nodded. Then did something completely unexpected. He hugged the Alpha King. Tiny arms wrapped around the ruler of the kingdom. Several guards gasped. No one had touched the Alpha King without permission in years. Kaelin remained completely still. Slowly, very carefully, he placed one hand on the child's back. You are safe now. The little boy smiled. I know. He pointed toward Elara. Because she said so. Kaelin looked toward Elara once again. Respect filled his eyes. Not because she had challenged soldiers. Not because she had defied the council, but because frightened children believed her promises more than they believed the power of a king. Suddenly, the peaceful moment shattered. The sound of approaching horses echoed across the mountain. Another group of riders climbed the snowy road. Richly dressed nobles, expensive banners, golden armor. At their center rode High Luna Seraphine. She stepped gracefully from her horse, beautiful, elegant, cold. Her icy blue eyes immediately settled on Elara. "So," she said softly, "this is the famous Omega." Her smile never reached her eyes. She bowed politely toward Kalen. "My king, I came as soon as I heard." Kalen gave only a slight nod. Seraphine slowly walked toward the cabin. Her expensive boots stopped just outside the doorway. She looked at the frightened children. Not with kindness, with calculation. There are certainly many of them. She folded her hands. Far more than anyone expected. Elara instinctively stepped in front of the children again. Seraphine noticed. A faint smile crossed her lips. "Still protecting them." "I always will," Elara answered. The High Luna laughed quietly. "How touching." She turned toward the gathered villagers. "Tell me, does anyone here know where these children truly came from?" No one answered. "Exactly." She slowly faced Kalen. "My king, this woman has gathered unknown children from every corner of the territory. Some may carry royal blood. Others may belong to rival packs. She refuses to identify them. She refuses to surrender them." He paused dramatically. "Does that not sound like kidnapping?" Whispers spread through the crowd. Several villagers looked uncertain. Seraphine saw doubt growing. She smiled inwardly. Then she delivered her most dangerous lie. "My king, I have reason to believe one of those children is the missing heir of Alpha Lord Magnus." Gasps echoed across the valley. Elara's eyes widened. She looked toward the frightened children. She had no idea who any of them had been before they arrived. Seraphine pointed directly toward a small silver-haired boy standing behind Finn. The child immediately began trembling. "There! Bring him forward." Two soldiers stepped toward the boy. Instantly, the child screamed. "No!" He ran behind Elara. He buried his face against her back. His tiny body shook uncontrollably. "Please. I don't want to go. I won't go back." Elara gently wrapped one arm around him. "You don't have to be afraid." She looked directly at the soldiers. "No one is taking him until the truth is known." Seraphine's smile disappeared. "You dare oppose the royal court again?" Elara met her gaze without fear. "I dare protect a frightened child." The entire mountain fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Kalen watched the scene unfold. One woman, standing against nobles, soldiers, and fear itself. In that moment, the Alpha King understood something that would change the kingdom forever. Strength was not measured by claws, or titles, or bloodlines. True strength was standing between innocent children and the people powerful enough to hurt them. But hidden behind Seraphine's calm expression, a darker plan had already begun, because she knew something no one else did. If that little silver-haired boy ever revealed the truth about why he had been abandoned, the secrets of the kingdom's greatest noble families would finally come into the light. And Seraphine would do anything to make sure that day never came. The little silver-haired boy buried his face against Elara's shoulder. His tiny fingers clung to her dress so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His whole body shook with fear. "I don't want to go back," he whispered through tears. "They'll leave me again." Elara gently wrapped both arms around him. "No one will force you." Her voice was calm. But every word carried quiet strength. "You are safe." The child slowly looked up at her. "You promise?" She smiled. "I promise." Only then did the little boy stop shaking. Across the snowy courtyard, High Luna Seraphine's smile disappeared. She had expected fear. She had expected surrender. Does it? This forgotten Omega continued standing between power and innocence. Seraphine stepped forward. "My king!" Her elegant voice echoed across the silent valley. "That child belongs to Alpha Lord Magnus. He is the rightful heir to one of the oldest bloodlines in the kingdom." Several nobles nodded immediately. One elderly lord added, "Blood should return to blood." The gathered villagers began whispering among themselves. Perhaps the child really belongs with his family. Maybe the Omega should let him go. Elara heard every word. She looked down at the frightened boy hiding behind her. Then she quietly asked him, "What is your name?" The child hesitated, then whispered, "Rowan." She smiled gently. "Rowan, do you know these people?" The little boy immediately shook his head. "No. Do you want to go with them?" His answer came without even a second of hesitation. "No. I want to stay here." He looked up at Elara with tear-filled eyes. "Please. You said this was home." Elara gently brushed the snow from his silver hair. "It is. You don't have to be afraid." King Kaelin watched every moment without speaking. His sharp eyes never left Rowan's face. Children could lie. Adults lied every day. Fear, could never be faked. Commander Darius stepped beside the king. "My king. The boy truly believes she is his family." Kaelin quietly answered, "I know." Another group of horses climbed the mountain path. This time, an enormous black carriage stopped before the gathered crowd. Its golden crest belonged to Alpha Lord Magnus. The carriage door slowly opened. A tall Alpha stepped onto the snow. Expensive fur covered his shoulders. His silver hair matched Rowan's perfectly. Behind him walked several servants. The villagers immediately bowed. "Alpha Magnus." The nobleman looked directly at Rowan. Not with joy. Not with relief. Simply, with cold calculation. "There he is." Rowan immediately hid behind Elara. His breathing became quick. No. I don't want to go." Magnus frowned. "Come here." The child refused to move. His voice became even smaller. "Please don't make me." Magnus sighed impatiently. "You've embarrassed this family long enough." The entire valley became silent. Kaelin slowly turned toward the noble. "Embarrassed?" Magnus immediately bowed. "My king. The boy has always been." He paused carefully. "Different." Elara narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Magnus answered without shame. "He cannot shift." Gasps spread across the crowd. The noble continued. "For years we believed he was only a late bloomer. But he never transformed. He cannot become a wolf." Several nobles exchanged uncomfortable looks. Magnus folded his hands behind his back. "A future alpha who cannot shift is impossible." "So you abandoned him?" Elara asked quietly. Magnus looked almost offended. "It was necessary." Those 3 words struck the crowd like thunder. Necessary. Rowan buried his face against Elara again. Small sobs escaped his lips. Magnus continued speaking as though discussing livestock. "A weak heir would destroy our bloodline. The council would never accept him." Elara could barely believe what she was hearing. She looked down at Rowan. The frightened child had done nothing wrong. His only crime was being born different. She slowly faced Magnus. "You left your own son to die." Magnus remained calm. "I protected my family's future." "No." Elara's voice became stronger. "You protected your pride." The villagers stared in shock. No Omega had ever challenged a powerful alpha like this. Magnus frowned. "You forget your place." Elara gently held Rowan's hand. "My place is beside every child who has been abandoned." Magnus stepped forward. "He belongs to me." Rowan suddenly screamed. "No." His desperate cry echoed through the mountains. I don't belong to you. The little boy began crying uncontrollably. You said I was broken. You said monsters don't deserve fathers. Several women in the crowd covered their mouths. One elderly villager quietly wiped away tears. Even hardened soldiers looked away. Magnus' expression tightened. You're too young to understand. I understand, Rowan shouted. You left me. The words pierced the frozen silence. King Kaelan slowly walked toward the child. He stopped beside Elara. For the first time. He knelt beside Rowan. His deep voice remained gentle. Look at me. The little boy slowly lifted his tear-filled eyes. Kaelan asked only one question. When she found you? He nodded toward Elara. What did she ask for in return? Rowan blinked. Nothing. Did she ask your family name? No. Did she ask if you could shift? No. What did she say? A small smile appeared through Rowan's tears. She said, I was safe. Kaelan slowly stood. Then he turned toward the gathered nobles. His golden eyes were colder than the winter itself. The child has answered. No one dared interrupt. The Alpha King looked directly at Magnus. You abandoned your son because he did not meet your expectations. Magnus lowered his head. My king. I acted for the honor of my bloodline. Kaelan's voice became dangerously quiet. And she. He pointed toward Elara. Protected your son without even knowing his name. Silence. Complete silence. The king's gaze swept across every noble gathered there. Tell me, which one of you truly acted with honor? Not a single voice answered, because every person standing there already knew the truth. But hidden behind the crowd, Seraphine quietly clenched her fists. Everything was slipping away. The king's respect for Elara was growing stronger with every passing moment. And if more children began telling their stories, the kingdom would soon learn that Rowan was not the only noble heir who had been abandoned. There were many more. Far too many. She lowered her eyes to hide her anger. A dangerous idea formed inside her mind. If the children could not be silenced, then perhaps the place protecting them would have to disappear forever. Seraphine lowered her head respectfully before the Alpha King. From the outside, she looked calm, graceful, composed. But inside, her thoughts burned with anger. This was never supposed to happen. A forgotten Omega was supposed to disappear quietly beneath the weight of noble accusations. Every passing hour made Elara stronger. The villagers no longer looked at her with suspicion. They looked at her with respect. Even worse, the Alpha King himself had begun listening to her. That alone made Elara more dangerous than any warrior. Seraphine slowly stepped forward. My king. Her voice remained smooth and controlled. None of us support abandoning innocent children. She glanced toward Rowan. What happened to this boy is tragic. She paused just long enough to sound compassionate. But one emotional story cannot erase the law. Kaelan remained silent. She continued. If every abandoned child is gathered into one place without royal permission, how can the kingdom know who they truly are? How can we know whether enemies have hidden spies among them? Several nobles nodded. The crowd began whispering again. Seraphine noticed the doubt returning. She smiled inwardly. Fear was always easier to control than compassion. She slowly turned toward Elara. Tell us. Can you name every child's family? Elara quietly shook her head. No. Can you prove they are all innocent? No. Can you prove none belong to rival packs? No. Seraphine spread her hands toward the crowd. You see. This woman admits she knows nothing about the children she protects. A few villagers lowered their heads uncertainly. The silence became heavy once more. Before Seraphine could continue, a tiny voice interrupted. I know. Everyone turned. It was Finn. The little boy slowly stepped forward. His knees shook. but he refused to hide. He looked directly at Seraphine. I know. The High Luna frowned. You know what? Finn swallowed hard. I know. That Lady Elara saved me. He looked toward the gathered villagers. When I came here, I hadn't eaten for 3 days. My feet were bleeding. I thought I was going to die. He smiled at Elara. She gave me her own food. She slept beside me because I was afraid. She never asked if I was important. She only asked if I was hurting. Complete silence. Another child stepped forward. Little Lily. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. I couldn't speak. I was too scared. I thought everyone hated me. She looked at Elara with watery eyes. But every morning, she braided my hair. And she told me I was beautiful. The little girl smiled through tears. No one ever said that before. A murmur spread through the villagers. Another child stepped forward. Then another. Then another. Nearly every orphan stood together. One little girl held the broken doll she had carried since arriving. I cried all night. She stayed awake with me. A pair of frightened twins held each other's hands. We were scared people would separate us. She promised we would stay together. A tiny boy looked toward the Alpha King. I forgot my birthday. Lady Elara made one for me. Laughter mixed with tears. Even some soldiers quietly smiled. Captain Roland slowly lowered his helmet. He had seen many battles. None had moved him like this. One elderly woman from the village stepped forward. I was sick last winter. The whole village feared catching my illness. Everyone stayed away. She pointed toward Elara. Except her. She cared for me every day. Another villager nodded. My son survived because of her medicine. A hunter spoke next. She healed my wolf after a trap shattered his leg. One after another, people began telling stories. Small acts of kindness. Quiet sacrifices. Things Elara had never spoken about herself. Kaylin listened without interrupting. Every story sounded the same. She gave. Even when she had nothing. She protected. Even when no one protected her. Finally, Kaylin looked toward Elara. Why? She blinked. My king. Why continue helping people? When so few have ever helped you. The mountain became silent. Elara looked toward the children surrounding her. Then toward the snowy forest. Finally, she answered. When I was little, my mother told me something. Her voice remained gentle. She said, kindness only matters when it's difficult. She smiled sadly. I couldn't save my parents. I couldn't save my pack. But maybe I could save someone else's family. No one spoke, not even the wind. Those simple words reached every heart standing there. Even Magnus slowly lowered his eyes. For the first time, shame crossed his face. Kaylin stepped forward. He stopped directly before Elara. The distance between them was only a few steps. You have no title, no wealth, no soldiers, no power. Elara quietly nodded. That's true. Kaylin looked toward the children. And yet, they would follow you anywhere. He slowly turned toward every noble gathered there. Tell me, how many of you can say the same? No answer came, because every noble already knew. Respect earned through fear could never equal love earned through sacrifice. At the edge of the crowd, Seraphine's fingernails dug into her palms. Everything was falling apart. She had lost the people. She was losing the king. If she waited any longer, she would lose everything. Quietly, without anyone noticing, she nodded toward one of her hidden servants. The man immediately slipped away into the forest. No one saw him disappear. One pair of glowing golden eyes. The oldest royal wolf stood beneath the trees, watching, waiting. He silently followed the servant into the darkness. Minutes later, the wolf returned to Kaylin. A low growl escaped his throat. The Alpha King immediately understood. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Commander Darius stepped closer. My king. Kalen's expression hardened. The wolves have found something. What is it? The king looked toward the forest. They're following someone. Someone hiding from us. That exact moment, far beyond the mountain, Seraphine's servant lit a torch. He looked toward the tiny orphanage glowing warmly in the distance. He smiled. The lady was right. If the children disappear, so does every secret. He raised the burning torch toward a pile of dry wood hidden beneath the cabin's back wall. The flames slowly began to spread. None of the children noticed. None of the villagers noticed. Only the oldest royal wolf suddenly lifted his head and let out a terrifying howl that shook the entire mountain. The fire had begun. The oldest royal wolf's howl tore across the mountain like thunder. Every bird burst from the trees. Every horse reared in fear. The sound carried only one meaning: danger. King Kalen's golden eyes sharpened instantly. Protect the children. His command echoed across the snowy valley. The royal wolves exploded into motion. 7 massive white guardians rushed around the cabin in a blur of snow and claws. Commander Darius drew his sword. Royal Guard. Form a perimeter. Armored soldiers surrounded the little house. The villagers looked around in confusion. What happened? Why are the wolves howling? Inside the cabin, Elara had just finished calming the youngest children when she smelled it. Smoke. Very faint, but growing stronger. Her heart skipped. She looked toward the back wall. A thin gray line slipped through the wooden cracks. Her face turned pale. Fire! Finn looked up. What? Before she could answer, one frightened little girl screamed. Lady Elara! The wall! Orange light flickered beneath the wooden floorboards. The children immediately panicked. Babies cried. Older pups rushed toward the door. The smallest children froze in fear. Elara clapped her hands loudly. Everyone listen to me. Her calm voice cut through the chaos. No running. No pushing. We leave together. The children looked at her. Even through their fear, they trusted her. Kalen raced toward the rear of the cabin. His expression darkened. Flames were already climbing the dry wooden wall. Someone had soaked the logs with oil. This wasn't an accident. It was murder. Commander Darius knelt beside the burning wall. My king! This fire was set deliberately. Kalen's jaw tightened. I know. He turned toward the royal wolves. Find whoever did this. Without hesitation, 3 wolves vanished into the forest. Their noses followed the scent left in the snow. The hunt had begun. Smoke thickened rapidly. The babies began coughing. Lily wrapped a damp cloth around the smallest girl's face. Finn helped the younger boys stay together. Elara quickly counted every child. 1, 2, 3. Her heart raced faster. Where's Rowan? Silence. Every child looked around. Finn's eyes widened. He went back. He said he forgot his wooden wolf. Elara's face lost all color. No. Without another word, she ran deeper into the smoke. Lady Elara! Finn shouted. Don't go. But she was already gone. The hallway disappeared beneath thick black smoke. Heat filled every corner. Wood cracked above her head. Rowan! I called. Rowan! A tiny voice answered through frightened sobs. I'm here. She followed the sound into the smallest bedroom. The silver-haired boy sat beneath the bed. His little carved wooden wolf was clutched tightly against his chest. The doorway behind him was already burning. Elara dropped to her knees. Come here. Rowan shook his head. My wolf. She smiled despite the danger. You already have him. He looked down, realizing he still held the toy. Fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. I thought I'd lose him. You won't. She reached for him. That exact moment, a burning beam crashed between them. The room shook violently. Kalen heard the crash. His heart stopped. Elara! No answer came. Smoke poured through the roof. Commander Darius grabbed the king's arm. My king! The roof is collapsing. Kalen pulled free. They're still inside. Without waiting, the Alpha King charged straight into the flames. The soldiers stared in disbelief. Your Majesty! But Kalen never slowed. Royal wolves rushed beside him. The heat was overwhelming. Smoke burned his lungs. He pushed deeper into the burning cabin. Elara! His powerful voice echoed through the fire. Inside the bedroom, Elara wrapped Rowan inside a wet blanket. She searched desperately for another way out. The window. She hurried toward it. It wouldn't open. The wooden frame had swollen from the heat. She pushed harder. Nothing. Behind her, the fire spread across the ceiling. Rowan began crying. Are we going to die? Elara looked into his frightened eyes, then smiled. No. You promised. He whispered. I know. And I keep my promises. She wrapped both arms around him, then kicked the frozen window with all her strength. The glass shattered. Cold winter air rushed inside. Before she could climb through, another beam crashed across the opening, blocking the escape. The room filled with flames. Kalen finally heard Rowan crying. He followed the sound. One burning wall separated them. Without hesitation, the Alpha King drove his shoulder into the burning timber. It didn't move. Again. The wood cracked. Again. The entire wall exploded inward. Flames burst into the snowy air. Inside the smoke, Kalen saw her. Elara, holding Rowan tightly against her chest, protecting him with her own body, even as burning pieces of the roof fell around them. For one heartbeat, their eyes met through the smoke. She smiled weakly. You came. Kalen didn't answer. He crossed the room in seconds. He lifted Rowan into one arm, then turned toward Elara. A burning beam suddenly broke loose above them. Without thinking, Elara shoved Kalen aside. The heavy timber struck her across the shoulder instead. She cried out in pain, then collapsed. Elara! Kalen caught her before she hit the floor. Blood stained her sleeve. Her breathing became shallow. She had protected him. The Alpha King stared at her in shock. No one had ever thrown themselves into danger to save him. The soldiers watched the burning doorway. Suddenly, a massive white wolf burst through the flames. Then another. Then Kalen emerged. Rowan safe in one arm. Elara unconscious in the other. The entire mountain fell silent. Every villager, every soldier, every noble watched. The most powerful man in the kingdom carried the forgotten Omega as though she were the most precious person in the world. Kalen slowly knelt in the snow. He brushed soot from Elara's face. Stay with me. His calm voice trembled for the first time in years. You've saved enough people. Now let me save you. That very moment, a furious growl echoed from the forest. 3 royal wolves emerged from the trees. Between them, they dragged a struggling man across the snow. His clothes smelled of oil. A half-burned torch still hung from his belt. Commander Darius drew his sword. The arsonist. The terrified servant looked directly toward High Luna Seraphine. His face turned white. He realized there was nowhere left to hide. The terrified servant collapsed onto the snow. His hand shook so violently that the burning torch slipped from his fingers. One of the royal wolves placed a massive paw across the man's chest. The servant did not even try to escape. He knew he couldn't. Not from the king's wolves. Not from the truth. Commander Darius ripped the half-burned torch from the man's belt. The smell of lamp oil filled the cold air. He held up a small leather pouch. My king. Oil. The fire was planned. A wave of whispers spread through the gathered villagers. It wasn't an accident. Someone tried to kill them. The children were inside. King Kaelin never took his eyes off Elara. She still lay unconscious in his arms. A royal healer rushed forward and carefully examined her shoulder. After several tense moments, the healer smiled with relief. The beam struck her hard. But the wound is not fatal. She'll wake. Kaelin quietly closed his eyes. For the first time since the fire began, he allowed himself to breathe. His expression changed. The warmth disappeared. Only the king remained. He slowly stood, still holding Elara safely. His golden eyes settled on the servant. Who sent you? The man lowered his head. I. Kaelin's voice became colder. Answer. The servant trembled. I was only following orders. Whose orders? Silence. The wolves growled. The servant finally broke. The High Luna. Every person standing in the valley gasped. Seraphine's face remained calm. Come. She stepped forward gracefully. My king. This man is lying. The servant looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. My lady. You promised. Before he could finish, a small silver dagger suddenly flew through the air. But the blade buried itself in the servant's shoulder. He screamed in pain. Hidden assassins. They had been waiting in the trees. They're silencing him. Commander Darius shouted. The royal guard charged into the forest. Steel clashed. Branches snapped. Shadowy figures fled through the snow. But they were no match for the king's wolves. Within moments, the White Guardians dragged 3 masked assassins into the open. Every one of them wore the High Luna's secret crest beneath their cloaks. The crowd stared in disbelief. Seraphine took one slow step backward. Kaelin finally looked at her. His voice was almost a whisper. You ordered this. She lifted her chin proudly. I protected the kingdom. You tried to burn children alive. They were dangerous. They were innocent. They carried secrets. Kaelin narrowed his eyes. What secrets? Seraphine laughed. A bitter laugh. You still don't understand. She pointed toward the frightened children gathered around Elara. They are living proof. Proof that your precious nobles abandoned their own blood. She looked toward Magnus. Then another alpha. Then another. How many of you threw away children because they couldn't shift? How many daughters disappeared because they weren't sons? How many babies were left in forests so your family name stayed pure? No one answered. 'Cause everyone knew. She wasn't lying. Many nobles lowered their heads in shame. Magnus closed his eyes, unable to meet Rowan's gaze. Seraphine smiled sadly. You built this kingdom. I simply protected it. Kaelin slowly shook his head. No, you protected fear. He turned toward every noble gathered before him. For years, you called yourselves honorable. You claimed noble blood made you better. He pointed toward Elara. Yet the poorest woman in this kingdom showed every one of you what honor truly means. His words echoed across the silent mountain. He continued. She fed children while she starved. She protected strangers while others abandoned family. She stood alone against soldiers. And today, she nearly gave her life to save one frightened boy. The villagers bowed their heads. Many wiped away tears. Finn stepped closer. He gently held Elara's hand. Please wake up. Lily whispered. We still need you. One by one, every child gathered around her. The smallest baby reached toward Elara's face. Tiny fingers touched her cheek. Slowly, very slowly, Elara opened her eyes. The children burst into joyful tears. Lady Elara. She's awake. Finn hugged her carefully. So many people were crying. You scared us. She smiled weakly. I'm sorry. Kaelin helped her sit up. You should rest. She looked around. The burned cabin. The frightened children. The captured assassins. Then she quietly asked. Is everyone safe? Kaelin smiled for the very first time. Small smile. But one the kingdom would never forget. Because of you. Yes. Elara looked relieved. That's enough. Kaelin shook his head. No. It isn't. He turned toward the royal council. His voice carried across the valley. Hear the judgment of your king. Every noble immediately knelt. High Luna Seraphine. You are stripped of every title. You will stand trial for attempted murder, conspiracy, and the murder of innocent children. Royal guards immediately surrounded her. For the first time, fear appeared in Seraphine's eyes. She looked toward Kaelin. You would choose an Omega over your own court. Kaelin answered without hesitation. I chose justice. The guards led her away. Then Kaelin faced Alpha Magnus. You abandoned your own son. Magnus fell to both knees. I have no excuse. No, Kaelin answered. You do not. Your lands are confiscated. Your title is revoked. Rowan will never again be forced to call you father. Rowan quietly stepped behind Elara. He smiled for the first time without fear. The Alpha King then looked toward the gathered nobles. From this day forward, no child in this kingdom will be abandoned because they are weak. No Omega will be judged by rank alone. And every orphan. He looked toward the children surrounding Elara. Will belong to the crown until they find a family. The crowd erupted into applause. Some cried openly. Others bowed deeply toward Elara. The woman they had once ignored had changed the kingdom forever. Kaelin slowly turned toward her. Snow drifted gently around them. The children watched with hopeful eyes. The king extended his hand. You once gave my wolves a home. You gave these children a family. You reminded your king what strength truly means. He took a slow breath. Elara, I cannot repay what you have done. But I can ask one question. The entire valley became silent. Kaelin looked into her eyes. Will you stand beside me? Not as the forgotten Omega, but as the Luna this kingdom deserves. Tears filled Elara's eyes. She looked at every smiling child surrounding them. At Finn. At Lily. Rowan. At the babies asleep in warm blankets. Finley. She placed her hand in his. Only if they come with us. Kaelin looked at the children, then smiled. Every one of them. The royal wolves lifted their heads toward the sky. A triumphant chorus of howls echoed across the mountains. Not as a call to war, but as a promise. The lonely Omega who had opened her door to every abandoned child had finally found the family she had always deserved.